Hi, I'm Cole Spivey. I wanted to read an article off of Backstage, and I want to first show you a picture of this amazing actor. Okay, now we're going to get into some name pronunciation. Giancarlo Esposito. That's what I'm going with. Um, so here, how to become a character actor like Giancarlo Esposito from Breaking Bad. I want to do a real quick shout out to Charlie Baker. We did a show together, Hip Pocket Theater, Waiting for Godot. He played one of the main characters, Go Go or Dee Dee. I played Lucky, and then Rob Vasquez played um, Ponzo, and I was Lucky. But anyway, he's in the new Breaking Bad movie that's coming out. And he's one of the only three in the actual movie. So congratulations, Charlie. You made it, man. So Charlie is, I know this thing. I saw Bradley Cooper soar high, having a little role on Alias. Bradley Cooper then landed something on Sex and the City, or it was the other way around. But anyway, he landed Alias, and then he just went freaking nuts, and now he's a household name. So Charlie Baker, I'm telling you now, you're going to be big. Piecing together Giancarlo Esposito, you probably know him from Breaking Bad, but the character actor has been working steadily for decades and showing no signs of slowing. The article is written by John Russel, September 25th of 2019 at 8:15 a.m. Giancarlo Esposito loves talking about acting, and most actors do. Why shouldn't he? It's what he does. It's what he's been doing since he was a kid. It's not just what he's good at, it's his passion. It's what gets him, and he puts it juiced. Okay, so, juiced. Now, he seems pretty juiced right now. There are moments in our conversation when I wonder if his enthusiasm might be a little too big for the booth we're sitting in, and too much for this empty basement bar on Christie Street, for the whole Lower East Side. He's empathetic. He's emphatic, he's excited, energetic, basically the polar opposite of what is probably his most famous role, the unnervingly taciturn drug lord and fried chicken purveyor Gus Fring. A role that has earned him 2 Emmy nominations for his performance on both AMC's Breaking Bad and its prequel, Better Call Saul, my favorite show ever. Better Call Saul on AMC. Love that show. Bob Odenkirk, mwah. Now, everyone thinks I'm so serious because I'm this dramatic actor. They've seen some stuff that I've done that may have intimidated them. Well, he says with a mischievous smile, that just means I'm good. As far as what makes Gus Fring in particular such a standout for Emmy voters, he admits he's no closer to pinpointing what makes a performance worthy of such honors. And that's straight vodka. I wish I could tell you it's one thing. It's the writing, it's the intensity, it's the time, it's the confidence, and it's the charisma. Awards talk aside, Esposito is also pretty juiced to be on the cover of Backstage. Good magazine, by the way. As young actors in the late 60s and early 70s, Esposito says the magazine was his lifeline to both the industry and a community of performers. When you're in a place where you don't have an agent, or you're looking for an agent, and you're trying to find showcases, and you're trying to find things to do as an actor, that was the magazine that always guided me, he remembers. It was part of my life. Backstage is important. Performing is in Esposito's blood. His mother was an African-American opera singer from Alabama. His father, an Italian stagehand from Naples. They met when she was performing in a production of Porgy and Bess that was touring Europe in the late 50s. Esposito's mother was a major influence on him. From an early age, she had a plan for her son. She was training me to be a little opera boy, he says, and that was my plan. Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't my plan. But his voice training and expressive style led Esposito to musical comedy, and he appeared in his first Broadway show, Maggie Flynn, when he was just 8 years old. Sorry, I had something in my throat. By the time he was in his late teens, he knew he wanted to take on more substantive material. There was a period of time there when, I wanted to be a star, he recalls, but I didn't know what the hell that meant. Esposito looked to the work of Burt Lancaster, Glenn Ford, and Paul Newman, actors whose film work often reflected significant socio-political or interpersonal themes. He realized that for him, acting meant portraying something real for the purpose of moving audiences. To do something real for a purpose takes commitment, he says. To hear him speak of his career and craft today, it's hard to believe Esposito ever wanted or ever went through a period of uncertainty, as nearly all actors do, doubting whether he would make it in the industry. But in the early days, he says, he often looked to other actors' stories and magazines' profiles, and unlike this one, for inspiration. To be inspired by someone else's story is very important. And he explains, I think half the battle for young actors is to encourage them to stay in it. Sorry about that. I'm in Texas, so it's like a lot of hay fever and everything. He recalls an encounter with the legendary actor George C. Scott when Esposito was 13, and Scott were performing in separate shows at the same theater. And one night, after he had a few drinks, Scott cornered the young actor. I saw you tonight, kid. You were fantastic. You really got what it takes. Esposito recalls Scott growling, but don't do it unless you really have to. I'll never forget that, Esposito says. Unless you really love it, unless you can't do anything else, that's got to be your driving force. Needless to say, Esposito stuck with it. On stage, he came alive in musicals like Seesaw and Merrily We'll Roll Along. That's where you develop your memory, your muscle memory, your physical acting, he says of the theater. Even subtle changes in your body depict what's going on. And if you're a body language reader in the theater, you got a chance to observe that. He earned 2 Obies for his work with the New York Negroes Ensemble Company and the Atlantic Theater Company, and transitioning from musical theater to more serious dramatic roles taught him a more subtle, intimate form of acting that prepared him for film work. I just tamed everything and started to feel things from an interior level, he explains. Esposito's filmography speaks for itself. Small roles in Taps, opposite of Tom Cruise, Sean Penn, and his old pal Scott. Desperately Seeking Susan, I think I remember him in it, and a breakout in Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, and he led to parts in Malcolm X and The Usual Suspects. I think I do remember him in Desperately Seeking Susan. He was also in The Usual Suspects. And when he was cast in Breaking Bad, Esposito practiced yoga to help him portray Gus Fring's intense calm and near inscrutability, but isn't married to a single approach to acting. His process varies depending on the role. Now that's interesting. I've never heard of that before. I say take the best and leave the rest, he says. If you commit yourself to one technique, for me, it would disallow me to pull from other modalities that I feel work. For his most recent role as Adam Clayton Powell Jr. on Epix, Godfather of Harlem, with Forrest Whitaker, Esposito started not by saying his lines out loud, but simply reading them over and over. It was more than just getting off book, he explains. I want the writer's words and intonations to be in my consciousness. And then I'll start to whisper a little bit. And then, as I get more confident, I'll come to find the character's voice. This is something I heard from Diane Salinger when I studied in Hollywood as an actor back in early 2000. She had trained some young actors, and I was part of her troupe in her acting class. And she had mentioned a couple of times about memorization silently and never saying the lines until it was time to say action. And Matthew Landau, when he won the Oscar in Ed Wood for playing Bela Lugosi, the rumor was that Matthew Landau never said. That was a fake sneeze. He never said the lines aloud until it was time to shoot. Matthew Landau won an Oscar for that. Now, you got to realize this, though. Matthew Landau was also doing an accent. So he was, that's risky. That's pretty risky. And he never did it out loud until it was time to do it. That's how good he was. That's the rumor. And we're talking about doing an accent and the lines and never saying them out loud until it said action. Try that one. So often actors are praised for disappearing into a character, but Esposito thinks it's important to lose himself in a role. And someone said to me years ago, "We want to see you. We like you." That opened my eyes and just keep a little piece of you there. That's particularly helpful when playing a real person like Powell. With film clips and recordings of Powell's voice available, Esposito said it would have been easy to turn to mimicry in an effort to do justice to the influential congressman. His strategy weighed to keep into things he and Powell had in common: his fun-loving nature, his love of women, and a good liquor, his intellect, and all of those things which lean more toward my attributes and which I do have to reach for. And Esposito asked, then he says, there's a link, there's the opportunity for me to do this character, or to interpret this character who moved so many people. In addition to Godfather of Harlem and Better Call Saul, Esposito appeared on 3 other series this year. He starred alongside Carlo Gugini this summer in Cinemax contemporary noir thriller Jet. That's another thing about Cinemax, is I haven't really been keeping up with Cinemax. He narrates Netflix college dramedy Dear White People, and the most highly anticipated of all, he'll star in Disney's The Mandalorian, the first ever live-action Star Wars television series. But of all his high-profile projects, the one he can't stop thinking about is the role in upcoming streaming feature Stargirl, also on Disney. And I want to show you a photo. Okay, first it's a supporting role, but on the found particular profound. That's who I want to be, he says. That's how I think of the power that my work can have, when he's talking about the Stargirl. And this film, it's based on Jerry Spinelli's young adult novel of the same name. Esposito plays an advisor and mentor figure to a group of high school students. It's a supporting role, but one that he found particularly profound. And that's when he says, that's who I wanted to be. He says, that's who I think of the power that my work can have. And I'm going to show you a picture of him real quick. Now, Esposito is himself a teacher and a mentor to young actors, and still teaches an annual seminar at the Atlantic Theater Company. He tells his students to read everything they can to get their hands on, and not just scripts, but books, poetry, plays. Get interested in and allow the human interactions that are written by writers to link with you and understand the complicated nature of it. Now, Stella Adler taught this to Marlon Brando and other of his students. They would wake up, have their coffee, and read an article. And she mentioned the New York Times and things like that. It didn't matter. You know, if it's an article, you have an exposition. Sometimes you have a climax in an article. You have an ending. It's like a story. It's not just the written word that actors should read, Esposito says. It's equally important to get adept at reading people and develop a sense of empathy. So something that we all need to work on. We are performers, and actors are very sensitive, he adds. I can tell when somebody is in pain and when they're happy and when they're in conflict. For actors, the biggest advice I could give is to observe everything. Another thing about Stella Adler and Marlon Brando, she would have him go out in New York and observe people and watch them. and kind of study them and their behavior, just like an artist would, when they're painting, studying what they're thinking about, or studying what they're doing, their behaviors and why they do certain things, and then he's talking about reading their empathy, reading their emotions when they're talking to them. But of that work is paying attention to detail, to what's happening in the world around you. It's something Esposito says young actors need to work at more than ever in our hyper-connected age, with smartphones and social media constantly pulling our attention away from the moment. It's an indicative of where we are and the belief that we can multitask every part of our lives. And he says, I would contend that we're only giving partial attention to what we're doing now. And that's a big part of my success, to be able to breathe, allow real time to happen, and not feel rushed. With that in mind, it makes sense that the actor has built an acting career with 5 decades worth of memorable roles across the stage and screen. In addition to his own acclaimed performances, Esposito has worked side by side with the most consequential talents of the last century: James Earl Jones, Mia Farrow, Denzel Washington, Bryan Cranston, Angela Bassett. He's seen them work up close, and while it's been a long time since he felt intimidated walking onto a set, he remembers what it was like to be the new kid on the block. When you get that big break, he says, the key is not to give in to fear. And just to sum up, I remember when I had worked with Jim Carrey, and we were working on The Majestic, and I knew he was kind of like the new Jerry Lewis. He was an icon in Hollywood at the time. But I knew that there was something in me. I got to keep it together. I got to listen to the director. I've got to focus on what's going on. I've got to stay in line on what they need me to do, and not just be obsessed with what Jim Carrey is doing. Although we would all look over there and like, what the crap is he going to do next? Because he's like a magnet when it comes to entertainment. But we had to stay focused, and we had to remember things, and there was things we had to do, and we had to say, okay, yeah, he's a star, but I've got to focus on this little part that I'm going to have and do. And the next thing you know, the more I stayed focused, all of a sudden I looked right next to my shoulder, and he was like that far away from me, standing there getting ready to do something. And I just did exactly what the director told me to do. And they changed me around. They said, no, you look too much like Jim Carrey. We're going to, this is when I was 27. I was like 147 pounds. They're like, we're going to move you over here. And I was like, damn, dang it. But I did do a lot of stuff that day. We worked for 8 hours or 10 hours. That's a lot of work in one time. So when you're on set at any moment and you've got 8 or 9 or 10 hours to work with someone, stay focused on what you need to do. Kind of get some notes, take some notes of what's going on, watch them work, but stay focused on what you need to do most importantly. And, take instruction and just do what needs to be done and stay in the moment, the most important thing. And this is called Piecing Together Giancarlo Esposito from Backstage article. Thank you.